Welcome back to this part 2 update for the month of August 2020. I'm Michelle Leech, and I have with me Chris, the founder of Totem Live, and Toufiq, the co-founder of Totem Live. A lot's been happening over this past month, so if you missed part 1, you can catch up in the link below. The good news is that this past weekend, Totem Live arrived at version 1.10.1. So if you're running a node, please upgrade now. Now back to Totem Tech Talks. Let's get started.
So I guess picking up from where we left off yesterday.
Yeah, I think we finished the first column.
Yeah, I don't think we talked about the rewrite of the chat interface, did we?
Yeah, no, we haven't. We did mention about it in the previous Tech Talk.
Yeah, so Toufiq, if you want to explain a little bit about why we rewrote it and what it now does that it didn't do before.
So as the chat originally started as a more like a troll box, so mainly for demoing to people or just talk about something as a public chat. But eventually we realized that within any application, it requires two parties to communicate with each other. It makes sense to have a chatting mechanism where they can talk about the things they are working on. And that's why we started changing the troll box into more like a traditional chatting mechanism. So we updated the chat backend as well as the front-end interface to support one-to-one chat as well as group chats. And then eventually we realized that it would be quite useful for user to directly contact us when they are actually using it and facing a problem, instead of having to go to, say, Discord or Telegram to be able to reach out. They can just right now, using support chat mechanism, they can just directly send us a chat message and someone from Totem can actually attend to them and then talk about whatever the problem they are facing, or if they need any instructions or guidance. Yeah. So that's in a nutshell that we have changed in the chatting mechanism.
Yeah, I think this makes it quite an unusual interface, because basically, if you think about chat, most people just think of something like Skype in the business context, at least, or they'll use WhatsApp, or they'll use Telegram. They'll use some third-party communication tool in order to talk about something that's in another tool. Even today, for example, when we were trying to get together to arrange this Zoom call, what we were doing was communicating via other channels. We weren't communicating via Zoom itself. The principle of this is, if you're inside Totem, you've got a problem, or you want to talk to one of your customers or suppliers, you don't have to leave Totem to talk to them. You don't have to send an email and hope that they pick the email up. You can just ping them directly inside Totem, and perhaps in some future iteration of this, you'd be able to refer to the items specifically in the chat and perhaps provide some form of linking mechanism that says, okay, I'm talking about this invoice, here's the link, and you would be effectively sharing the same piece of information.
Yeah.
So it kind of made sense to do that. And again, if you could sort of compare it to maybe LinkedIn just has, in my opinion, a chat interface for the sake of having a chat interface, but it's not really specific to LinkedIn in itself. It's just so people can annoy other people with messages, whereas this has a specific reason for being there.
So actually the chat interface now has made things a bit easier to actually share identity or request identity. You can just click on the user ID, and then it pops up a model with certain options if you want to send them your identity or request them identity. So things that would have been manual, now it becomes a bit more interactive. What you said about linking things, like whatever you were working on. So this goes one step closer to that.
If you don't have to create a Telegram channel, a Slack channel, or all these other channels to communicate and get work done, so that you can reduce the amount of channels you have.
Yeah, it's people who are working on projects, especially larger projects, they end up with building loads and loads of separate channels or loads of different type of application, and it gets quite annoying, at the same time quite hard to manage.
Will you be able to share documents over in individual chats, or?
Not at the moment. In the near future, we intend to add functionality so that you can share, like Chris mentioned, you can share a specific link or an ID of document and data record or whatever within the application. Then the other person can quickly refer to it, or just click on some button and then just go directly into the specific record.
Yeah, so a use case of that would be, I send Toufiq an invoice and Toufiq doesn't agree with the invoice. So he disputes it, but he disputes it and is able to communicate with me perhaps the reason why he disputes it and specifically a link to that invoice. So you can have these kind of dialogues and relate them specifically to items inside the accounting function itself. And that I find quite useful. It's also, I think, would be very useful from an accountant's point of view, because they would know that there's a dedicated channel to every customer, every person that they deal with.
And you don't have to rummage through your emails to find
exactly.
chat, conversations, documents, things like that.
Exactly.
Also, all your accounting records, if you're using Totem, it's going to be inside Totem. So it makes sense to have that link right within the application so that you don't have to go out to use another application.
Yeah.
And if we move on to the migration to Polka.js, we discussed that in the first video, the learnings and the takeaways and the process of migrating to Polka.js. It looks like then we move on to the accounting engine milestone, which actually has quite a lot of greens from this month.
Yeah.
So the settlement mechanism, maybe we start with that one, and we go through some of these. I think also the one that's interesting is the purchase order module as well.
Yes. So it's probably better to start with that actually, because the simple purchase order module is effectively related to the tasks module that we've been working on. So we realized that basically a task is an order of some kind, but naturally with any order there has to be the point at which somebody fulfills that order, perhaps sends you an invoice, you need to accept the invoice, and you need to pay the invoice. So in just the simple idea of this is a task module actually isn't so simple, because we needed to construct all of the other mechanisms, but then again, all of the other mechanisms are going to be necessary for the accounting engine anyway. So with the tasks module, we created the idea of a pre-funded task. So let's say I want a task to be done, but I'm prepared to pre-fund that task and say, okay, I'm going to allocate some funds against that. And the person that's going to be doing the work wants to know that I've allocated some funds, and it's not just me saying that I've set aside some funds. I actually have to lock some funds up for them so that they will have confidence that if they take on that task, they would be able to do it, and they know that the money is already there to pay them at the end of the day, even if the whole process hasn't gone from end to end yet. And again, this kind of leads on to the idea of a marketplace, a bit like Gitcoin, but in Totem, where you can set tasks up, pre-fund them, have people apply to those tasks. And then eventually, once they've confirmed that they're completed and you're happy with the completion, then you confirm it and the payment is automatically deducted from your pre-funding and everything is settled. Obviously, going along with this whole process, you still need to do the accounting side. So the fact that you've taken some funds from your account and set them aside in a locked account for pre-funding is an accounting procedure. Once the invoice has been created and received by the other party, it happens in one go. But those are accounting procedures. And then finally, once the invoice is accepted, the movement of the funds from your locked account to the other party is not just a transfer of funds, but is also an accounting process. And then, of course, you have the settlement of your invoice, which means that the invoice is accounted for as well. So there were many, many parts that needed to be constructed in order to just do this supposedly simple tasks module. So that there was quite a lot of effort that went into building those mechanisms. Inside the accounting module, we have a number of accounts that are linked to our chart of accounts, and we have those now in storage, so in the blockchain storage, and therefore we can read those account details and create things like the trial account balance or the profit loss or the balance sheet. This is still somewhat work in process, but for the most part, the actual underlying mechanisms that are related to the blockchain are completed. If you look at it from, say, a financial reporting point of view, it's probably not quite there yet, but certainly from a storage and database point of view inside the blockchain itself, it's more or less there. So these are kind of important mechanisms that needed to be in place generally for the whole idea of Totem to be kind of proved, basically. We'd done that in the proof of concept a long, long time ago in a very lightweight way, but this is now doing it for real in the application as we want it to be used.
So the rest of those are also depreciation, cash flow. Those will also be part of the accounting module?
Yes. So the way blockchain works is significantly different to the way an accountant let's say they have something called a straight line depreciation, which is basically a calculation that says it depreciates by this percentage every month until it's basically zero. But because a blockchain operates not on a calendar time or even on a clock time, it works on block time. So effectively every block is a point in time for a blockchain. What you can do is you can set up those rules so that they can be applied with every block rather than wait till the end of the month. You can take fractions of depreciation in an ongoing basis or on a block basis and depreciate your asset as time goes along. And this is what effectively makes real-time accounting. It's not possible with normal accounting because you don't have the notion of block occurring every 15 seconds. You have the notion of your accounting period closing every month, but you don't have it as frequently as a blockchain has. So we can do some really, really interesting things, but that's for later.
What's actually also interesting is for users, that they won't actually have to deal with any of this. We're covering these things in the engineering and development, but a Totem Live user won't have to deal with the nitty gritty of how all of these relate to one another when they use Totem.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, if you look at it from an accountant's point of view, the accountant, rather than having to do the work, just have to validate that what's being calculated is correct. So that frees up a lot of time for them to make other decisions about tax benefits, for example. So they'll probably still have to make adjustments within the accounts, but the underlying sort of stuff that can be automated can be done here in a way that wouldn't normally be possible with an accounting system.
And it looks like we have one more of the green on the external data set milestones, the sign up form on the website.
It was just an additional thing that we added. Obviously, we started to notice that we were getting a bit more interest onto our website and we were getting a lot of signups, but we didn't quite have enough information there to be able to sort of make use of it. So we did a small update to that sign up form. And then Toufiq, I think, suggested that we should have the sign-up form also in the app itself, which kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that's another update from at least from a user's perspective. If you're looking at the Totem Live application, now you have the third part of the process, the short steps. You have the third one, which is to back up. We talk about backing up your account.
Yes.
Now there's a clear notice that this is something that you need to do, or you can back up an existing account. And then we also you guys added the social components to Totem Live and the signups. So these things just make it easy for people to engage with the community. And so if you are using Totem Live, then you want to definitely sign up for our newsletter and e-communication, since we will be having some news over the next couple of months that you might want to keep track of. So we've basically covered all of the engineering and development updates this past August for our milestones. And the milestones, if you have not watched the first video, the milestones are not necessarily in sequential order, but they're just components that will be getting us to mainnet. And these Totem Tech Talks are monthly recaps of our engineering work that Toufiq and Chris are doing. And we will also have a blog post that will help provide a little bit more information on this. But we will also be doing more community communication as we have these announcements coming up, and keep going with these Totem Tech Talk sessions. Thanks everyone for tuning in to this month's Totem Tech Talks. Check out our blog for community updates. We've got some big news coming up. You can also get connected with the team and other members of the community on our Discord channel. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Until next month's Totem Tech Talks.